Thank you so much for joining us today for this webinar. We are going to start this session, and I'm going to begin by introducing myself. My name is Hurer bin Sohail. I am the managing editor for Inavate APAC, and I will be your moderator for today. Today, we're going to be talking about how we can future-proof fluid and flexible workplaces. Now, workplaces are changing. There are a lot of new stakeholders that are coming to the party, all the way from HR to facilities to IT. And the discussion is getting complicated, primarily because of hybrid work. To talk about this, we have a really amazing panel put together, and I will let them introduce themselves. Archie, if you could introduce yourself to our audience today.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Good day. And I am Archie Kuda. I am the Regional Design Director of MCX Interior. Thank you for having me here again. It is a great privilege to be part of this afternoon's talk. MCX Interior is an interior design and build firm specializing in the delivery of workplace solutions across Asia, where I myself oversee projects throughout the region, developing design concepts and ensuring our team develops those concepts and carries them through all the details. So I'm excited to share some of our experience and thought process in creating hybrid workplace. So thank you.
Thank you, Archie. Greg, if you could introduce yourself.
Thank you, Hara. I'm Greg Pierce. I'm an architect, and I'm the co-founder and managing director of OneSpace. We're a regional design firm located in Hong Kong and Singapore. I'm located in Singapore. We work for multinationals across the region, developing workplace solutions, retail, hospitality, and event spaces. I'm very excited and privileged to join this conversation, as we are also an integrated audiovisual IT architecture and interior design company. So I'll be focusing today on how those various disciplines are best integrated into the workplace today, and really understanding human behaviors as they're changing, particularly post-pandemic, and how that plays, our research and behaviors plays into the work that we do. So thank you, Hara.
Thank you, Greg. And last but not least, Gerald, if you could introduce yourself.
Thanks. My name is Gerald Marcus, and I joined Shure in 2021 as a market development specialist. So prior to this, I was actually studying in audio production, and I started out as an audio freelancer at the age of 14. So actually, to date, I have 14 years of AV experience from freelance to, and I then joined a system integrator as an AV and commissioning engineer after my graduation. So together with all of this experience combined, I'm able to provide technical system designs, and I also work very closely with customers to deliver the best solutions for their AV conferencing and collaboration requirements.
Thank you, Gerald. Let's jump right into the conversation. And I want to start with the workplace. Now, it's gone hybrid, right? That's something that we can all agree on, right? Now, hybrid might mean something different across regions, across companies, across time zones. That's fine. However, the balance of hybrid is definitely between the workplace, which could be your office or a facility, and it could be, on the other end, the remote location, which could be your home, or it could be any other third location. What I want to talk about is this thing about making the commute worth it, right? Previously, we'd all just go to the office, right? Whether that was 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 1 hour commute, we would just all undertake it. But with hybrid work, people are examining that time, right? They're looking at that maybe 1 hour commute and trying to figure out, is it really worth it for me to spend 1 hour just commuting to the office? Can I use that time better? So, Greg, what are your thoughts on making the commute worth it for today's hybrid workers?
Yeah, that is the key question. The answer lies in understanding why anyone would want to go back to the office post-pandemic. This situation has called into question the very existence of the office, and has caused people to question whether the office as we know it might become extinct. We've written widely on this, and our belief that the office will not be extinct, but that its fundamental purpose needs to change. So the point about commute is quite interesting. There's a lot of survey data over the past 2.5 years which have explored this question, and an interesting point is to recognize some important cultural differentiators. For example, one study by a Singapore-based research firm called ChangeWork found that office workers in the West were twice as likely as office workers in Asia, Southeast Asia, to have had some work from home experience prior to the pandemic. And so for Asia, for most of us in Asia, it was a tough adjustment. And one of the reasons behind that was, in fact, the commute times. They found that in most North American cities, Australian cities, Canada, and even Europe, the commute period of the day was a significant contributor to one's calculation about one's use of time. And in most Asian cities, like we're very lucky here in Singapore and our colleagues in Hong Kong, to have a very robust transportation infrastructure that allows for us to commute very quickly. So in spite of that, and perhaps because of the fact that Asian workers got accustomed to working from home, about 71% of those surveyed in the middle of the pandemic expressed a yearning to get back to the office. However, they wanted to go back 2, 3, 4 days a week. There was not a great desire to go back 5 days a week. And it really calls back to that point. Why do they want to come back? Well, they found that solo productivity can indeed be better at home. That was proven through some research. However, the all-important follow-on from those solo moments of productivity was being lost. The ability to push a project forward with your colleagues, to use your teamwork, to leverage the work that you've done and to get on to the next step. And they found that that was missing. And so those people yearned for those social interactions. They yearned to be able to get together with their colleagues again. The day of coming back and sitting at your desk doing your tasks is perhaps gone, but the day of coming into the office to meet with others and to connect even in virtual mode as well as in personal mode, that's the future. And that demands seamlessness and that seamless experience. And that's really the holy grail of the digital, the kind of the virtual collaboration that we're talking about. The hybrid collaboration demands seamlessness and experience. And that's really where I think we are today in terms of the developments we're making in this field.
Archie, what are your thoughts? Because I'm sure people are asking you to design and deliver workplaces that are going to attract workers back into the office. So what do you think is essential to make the commute worth it?
Okay, I mean, as we now see that new normal is hybrid working, and this has redefined the purposes of many offices that we have built so far. And we have identified reasons based on experiences why employees wanted to go back to the office or probably work from home. As what Greg mentioned, well, traveling back to office is going to be different right now, where we previously worked or we left a couple of years back pre-pandemic. So both physically and how we use it, it's now totally different, right? So based on recent studies, most of the workforce wants to work from home. However, we have certain lifestyle and human behavior that we cannot give up, and that is really for us to commune or connect physically. Well, this is the opportunity for the office space that can fill the gap of working from home that cannot fill. And this is an opportunity for us, designers or facilitators, who create spaces that should be promoting a social environment or destination for people to go and back to the office. And that's also that also promote a more kind of a learning experience for them to go and visit, where going back to the office is not just to finish their work, but also to really socialize. So in hybrid working, the main purpose of it as well is really to collaborate and connect when going back to the office. And one of the response that I got from clients why they want to go back to the office as well is mainly because when they do virtual meetings, like work from home, there has been an outcast on focus group discussions. And this is the reason why people are encouraged or they wanted to visit the office as well. So we would need to make sure that when we go back to the office, it doesn't go back to the old traditional way, where it's all boxes and stuff like that. And we should promote an environment that should be inclusive and humanized. And that includes technology that needs to be integrated into the overall design. Thank you.
Gerald, feedback from both Greg and Archie, right? It's people want to go back to the office for community and for in-person collaboration. Those seem to have been identified as the key drivers, the key things that are going to bring people back into the office. Now, we know that both collaboration in person and remote requires a little bit of enablement. It requires solutions, it requires technology. What are your thoughts on how we can turn the office into a place that is really enhancing these social aspects that both Greg and Archie have highlighted?
Hitch, I think that's a great question. I think from a manufacturer's or solutions provider perspective, I think simplicity and the aesthetics of things does play a part with the technology on top of that. So for example, we are introducing, as a solutions provider, we have been introducing new ceiling array microphones that actually look much nicer, that interior designers does actually help them with their work. So for example, we are introducing actually two ecosystems that actually help with the technology, STEM and Microflex ecosystem. STEM ecosystem was actually designed and built with different platform tools to actually help the end users actually with their audio issues. So for example, if you are going for a collaboration for a meeting, so for example, maybe you have somebody who is in Taiwan, somebody who is in the US, but you do need to have a team here to have this monthly meetings, for example, a sales meeting overseas. So using that with just one table microphone, that might not be sufficient. So it really depends on your space. So we do have a platform tool from STEM, which is called the Room Designer, that actually helps you with a common pain point. How do you actually spec your room properly? How do you actually select different type of form factors, different type of microphones that you can mix and match? So on top of that, audio quality is essential, something that is very important, that it's has to be clear. So the STEM ecosystem comes with an inbuilt DSP at the back. So what that means in a layman term, it actually auto-calibrates with what we call the room adapt function. So that actually plays the chirps in the room, and it calibrates to the room that you're in. So for example, if you're in a triangle room, in a circle room, or even an open collaboration space, that actually auto-calibrates for you, and it saves these settings in the DSP. So the only time that you have to run this again is when you move this device to a different room. And on top of that, simplicity, as we are talking about that, we have another ecosystem, which is the Microflex ecosystem, where we actually launched this back in June, the MXA 920. So the second gen MXA 920 simplifies the installation. So some of you may actually know the MXA 910 has different loops. When it's not calibrated properly, you might find that certain areas are actually not covered. So with the MXA 920, we actually provide an automatic coverage technology that provides a full coverage out of the box. But of course, the MXA 920 can do much more applications, such as voice leave, sound reinforcement, and camera tracking, where system integrators can offer their expertise in this area. But to also sum it up, the MXA 920 comes with a brown form factor, where it has new mounting accessories, which I think will help Greg and and the interior designers on this new mounting accessories, more options rather than just a flush square ceiling microphone.
Greg, I want to kind of reframe the question a little bit based on Gerald's input. You mentioned a seamless experience, right? And you obviously highlighted collaboration. Now, the collaboration part, right, is something that is not within our purview, right? That's for HR to decide. That's for the users themselves to decide what routines they're taking on. But I want to bring the conversation over to resources, because one of the things about seamless is the fact that we're just reducing friction, right? And when I look at it, right, like friction might just be, I don't have a printer at home. There's a printer in the office. That's a tangible resource that's available. Gerald highlighted a bunch of collaboration technology that might be present in the workplace and absent from your home, and hence it just removes friction and provides a better user experience. Are you seeing that as a drawing factor towards the office for users?
Yeah, this question's a really timely one, actually. I had just happened to have found some research published a couple days ago from a just released global study by Qualtrics XM, who are an employee engagement consultancy firm. They found that 86% of the executives they interviewed reported having the resources they need to perform their roles well. Great number. However, only 55% of what they call individual contributors, that means the everyday working workforce, said they were so well equipped. That's an unacceptable gap, and it really brings to question why that gap has emerged. It's an opportunity for improvement if we can understand why that's happened. And I think in a way, Gerald's just touched on it with regards to the products that Shure have, because I'm imagining that these executives are in some ways living in privileged environments in which they're able to shape their spaces, shape their environments around confidentiality for appropriate collaboration and around sharing. And I suppose the squeaky wheel gets the grease sort of thing as well. When things go wrong and the COO knows about it, you know, what really hits the fan. But every other person in the organization who doesn't have that sort of influence of authority may be suffering behind the scenes, and it only comes out when this survey comes to it. So I think that it's true. Those who are working from home, who are not well equipped at home, who live in smaller spaces, as we do in Asian cities, who are surrounded by extended families, as we often are in Asia, they are living a very different collaboration and hybrid work experience from those who don't. And the gap is an opportunity to be closed through design.
Let's transition into talking about tech then, because that seems to be one of the key resources that differentiates the experience workers have at the remote location and at the workplace. We've all come to the conclusion that AV tech is mission critical, right? Without video conferencing, without meeting rooms, without that kind of infrastructure, the pandemic would have been much worse in terms of business. End users have realized this. They're talking about tech earlier and earlier and earlier. People want to make sure that they've got their VC platform sorted before they even look at creating a new workplace. Archie, what are your thoughts about having this technology discussion earlier and earlier and earlier in a build project? And do you feel confident addressing these? Do you feel that you need to bring partners on board earlier to have this conversation? What are you seeing with your discussions?
Well, as a group in MCX Interior, we are integrated. We offer integrated services, and ideally, we actually bring in specialists, especially for AV integrators, to be in the discussion and be part of the discussion as well. But most of the time, pre-pandemic, clients are not that mature enough to really adapt to changes, and especially on technology, because they thought bringing their physical self to the office is enough for them to be productive, which isn't happening during pandemic. And even now, when we are designing spaces, technology should be integrated seamlessly, and they see the potential and they see the benefits of it. And we've actually served clients who are tech ready as well, where they built an infrastructure, and during pandemic, they are quite resilient on how they are more effective than other clients, because clients tend to change everything. They need to, demolish walls, change their work area to be more effective, to promote that social environment and collaboration. However, there are tech clients who are actually been adapting this kind of approach where they are more effective. And now end users are more open, they're more receptive to our sort of recommendations, especially when we invite technical support from any AV vendors that we could partner with. Yeah.
Greg, you highlighted tech as part of your introduction. Are you looking at maybe advancing the amount of tech you guys handle? What are your thoughts about this tech conversation happening earlier and earlier in build projects?
Well, this actually goes right to the reason that I co-founded OneSpace with someone who's not an architect like I am. My business partner is IT and audiovisual expert. He was a former executive at Goldman Sachs. And our idea when we started the company 18 years ago was, it's all the more relevant today, I suppose, is that the client and the users benefit from exactly what you're describing, bringing it into the conversation early. really understanding that audiovisual IT integration isn't at the detail level only, it's at the conceptual level. It's almost a philosophical level and a user level to try to create that seamless experience. As tech has advanced in these 18 years and with the pandemic accelerating some of those changes, we're starting to see that, as Archie said, clients are no longer dubious or in any way scared, I suppose, about bringing technology into the discussion. They're seeing it happen every day. COOs and heads of HR are seeing that their people are performing better with the technology support they're getting today, and they found that immediate need to do so during the pandemic. Once it was met, it became permanently embedded in the individual behaviors in the firm, in the companies. So the technology is always evolving. Users evolve and change. We have a younger workforce than we did 18, 20 years ago. And you know, more digital natives are now in the workforce than they were 18, 20 years ago as well. So that's been a good thing. It's been a good thing for the seamlessness of the experience. And educating stakeholders, well, you educate through example in a way, and showing everyone has had a really bad audiovisual experience. Every single person has been in a bad presentation where things just went horribly wrong. We all know how horrible it is. And so in some ways, when you talk in that sort of language to clients, they understand that tech plays a role, which is not just a nice to have, it's an essential.
Gerald, two responses that show that interior designers are being very tech forward. They're being very proactive when it comes to tackling this new end user that wants to talk about tech earlier. What's happening at Shure? Are you guys tailoring your products to kind of appeal and to these people who might not be very techy to begin with, right? They might understand tech, they might understand its functions, but they might not know the exact specifications that they require. Do you see Shure maybe changing its marketing approach to reach out and help them communicate the benefits of technology earlier?
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of end users understand that the audio quality and the video quality is essential. It's getting to be something that helps you run your meetings daily. So, for example, if you are using something that's an old technology that did not work, or for example, something that's on a wired microphone. So that's where end users are actually looking to see, what are the options now that I can go hands-free. So previously you are stuck down to a handheld microphone or a wireless belt pack, and that's limited to one person. So with this ecosystem, STEM ecosystem, or even Microflex ecosystem, that enables you to have kind of like a touch-free or wireless-free meeting where you can go on with the room. And I think on top of that is understanding the technology behind it, where Shure actually plays this part of the inbuilt DSP in STEM ecosystem. So within the devices itself, that actually calibrates that for the room. And that helps end user with the experience, so they don't actually have to, how do I actually tune this? Why do I sound bad, for example? But even in some challenging spaces, we are able to solve that kind of issues.
I just want to insert a question from the audience. It's about upskilling and maybe acquiring tech competencies for both the IDs that we have on the panel. Archie, any thoughts in terms of maybe expanding MCX and trying to get some tech people on board?
Yes, we do actually. Depends on the scale of the client's needs. I mean, I'm an architect, but I'm not an expert on technology, right? So when we approach the client, we need to make sure that we have equipped knowledge and sufficient information for us to propose some ideas to the client. But however, there are cases where clients wanted to see the entire horizon of opportunity for them to explore options on design solutions. So when we engage a vendor, sometimes it tends to be a little bit biased, right? so we need an expert to really like show us, these are the integrators who can really show best solutions on range of technologies available in the market for them to see. And we as facilitator or designers, we show them the pros and cons on each of these technology solutions that we can show to them. And that's where they will also evaluate and see lead time, cost, technical aspect of it, and if it's doable to their compliance, especially on different locations or different countries, like in China, India, wherever in Southeast Asia. They have specific sort of legal aspect of it, especially on companies who have very strict compliance with confidentiality, right? So each of these need to be more informative when we showcase it to the client. But that's on the cloud solution aspect. But on the hardware or the physical attributes of it, for sure, clients wanted to see the actual space at work. And this is why we bring in clients to the space and really showcase to them and demonstrate to them how technology can actually be seamless, humanized, to ensure that they don't feel like what Gerald mentioned, where there are a lot of wire exposed, and they feel uncomfortable. And our goal when we design spaces, we ensure that the space is flexible enough to kind of work. And sometimes if we think too much of function, the home aspect of it is gone, right? So that's why we need to find balance, as what Greg also mentioned earlier, where there should be a comfort and yet welcoming. That's why aesthetics comes in, and that's where it creates a much more fun environment to visit and go to the office.
Greg, just expanding the conversation from there, right? More tech is good, but your core competency is still architecture, it's still interior design, it's still making these spaces that are really resonating with users. How do you balance the two conversations? What do you guys do?
Yeah, as I mentioned, when we founded One Space, we found out we're understanding the equal importance of the digital and the physical world. But the fact is that the human experiences them differently. The spatial designs that we initiate for our clients and that we formulate for our clients are informed by the degree to which they are analog versus how they are digital. And I think Gerald and Archie have both touched upon it. The room environment is a perfect example. If you put in the most state-of-the-art audiovisual system into a room which hasn't been designed for it, then there's going to be a poor experience. The user experience is going to be subpar, if not worse than subpar. And so our clients expect for us to bring that balance through the way that we conceptualize spaces, but also the way we detail them, the way we integrate lighting into the rooms, for example. And our team has learned to be quite good at knowing that the conversation isn't about my discipline versus yours. It's truly interdisciplinary as opposed to multidisciplinary, if you know what I mean. It's about really understanding that the creativity and the collaborative creativity comes from sharing the issues, sharing the problems, and sharing the potential for solutions. So that's kind of how we balance it. We approach it holistically and comprehensively.
Gerald, any future plans from Shure's side to maybe design a bit more for this holistic approach? I know you've made a very good step with the MXA 920. It comes in different form factors and different colors, but is this something that you guys are actively taking into account when you're planning your roadmap?
Yeah, definitely. We constantly do surveys to reach out to the market. We just want to understand, what the users actually want. So actually, before we got STEM, we did a survey back in 2018 to actually find out what users actually want. So one of it was to have a critical interface that actually shows you what do you actually want to see. So for example, I'm using Zoom, I'm using Microsoft Teams. This is all I want to see. I don't want to see more than that. So for example, some of the functions might be too much for an end user. So I think what Greg mentioned, too much functions might actually, be more of a hindrance rather than the usability of the room. So for example, I'm going to be using this conference room 100 times or multiple times in a day. But do I have all these functions that I need, or do I have more than that, or how much am I using of these functions? So these are some of the things that we are constantly doing and understanding the roadmap, and we do have a business focus on the UC part of things to definitely develop new products to focus on what the end user really wants.
The last thing I kind of want to talk about from my side is the oxymoron that's in our title today, which is future-proofing something that is fluid and flexible. Now, we weren't very prepared for the pandemic. The crisis was very unique, right? So no blame to anyone. But what we realized was these kind of challenges pop up. And if you're not prepared for them, if you aren't ready for them, the impact can be very, very severe. Now, we're out of the pandemic. We're looking at hybrid work. We still don't know what it might be. It could be 2 days in the office, it could be 4 days in the office. It could mean many, many different things. And we just have to wait and see how it's going to evolve. On top of that, there might be other challenges that we haven't thought about or haven't considered that are over the horizon. So, Gerald, I'd like you to start us off by coming up with somewhat of a game plan for clients today so that they can future-proof themselves while still being able to adapt and still being able to be flexible and meet the needs of their workers.
Okay. So I would like to share. So for example, even from small, medium enterprise, somebody who's actually starting out to potentially being in the top 500 companies. So today maybe you have just one meeting room, but tomorrow you might have two, and in a year to come, you may have hundreds. So when you have that amount of rooms to feed out with audiovisual, what do you actually need? Firstly, I think scalability. So for example, the ability to combine and scale up from perhaps maybe this is just one room, but from maybe in another room, you can do a deviceable room, combinable rooms. So the STEM ecosystem actually allows you to combine that on the same network. And next would be the enterprise management. So for example, troubleshooting something before it actually happens. So STEM ecosystem actually provides you remote management tools for you to be able to scale and to test the devices remotely wherever you're actually at. So that actually generates a report. So how can this report be useful for you? So you can actually test the devices. So you know that, okay, before I enter this meeting at 8 a.m., this room has been tested and it's generated a report that this room is good to go. So when you scale up to hundreds of rooms, so that's where it's going to be a trouble for your IT managers. How am I going to check in every single room? How is this room working? Is that room working? Then you will need more staff on board to actually check those hundreds of rooms. But this remote management tool allows you to actually generate a report to scale up and also provide you with a basic minimal security settings as well, like for example AES 128.
Archie, what are your thoughts about future-proofing spaces for 1 year, 2 year, 3 years down the line?
Yeah, I mean, when we talk about the future workspace, it is workspace for future. But I think what we see now is really what we can potentially see in the future. So there's a chance for us to innovate, a chance for us to exercise, experiment within the workspace. And we have privilege to work with clients who really promote innovation in design spaces that allow designers and integrators like Gerard and everyone here who have the opportunity to work with them. That means they have actually been implementing new processes. That's why you mentioned they work hybrid, right? Not full-time in the office and etc. So our task right now is really to have an environment or design an environment that is super flexible, that to be able to expand and contract, right? But at the same time, if you see these kind of spaces, you will see grids, you will see modules. It tends to look like not like a home, right? So the future workspace, as we see it right now, they tend to work from home. So there shouldn't be a disconnect between these two spaces. So the future workplace, as what I mentioned earlier, to have it fun, it should look more comfortable than just the ordinary office that we normally have during pre-pandemic. And this is the reason why there is a chance for any companies to retain good talents, good skills, because it will increase the productivity by having a comfortable environment for themselves. As what I have also mentioned, there are more kind of social spaces, collaboration spaces for future workplace, because those kind of spaces are more flexible and adaptable. That means for you to have that environment work, then integration of technology is key for that space to be functional and successful. And at the same time, there will be a lot of variety of spaces because there is no perfect solution, I can say. I mean, you name any MNCs or small clients, they don't have a kind of a perfect solution, right? Even those who have tech integrated solutions in their office. So for us, we just need to be more adaptive, listening to the processes that company is having, and we would respond to that needs. Thank you.
Greg, what are your thoughts?
I'm reminded that I recently had a client who said to me, "You cannot future-proof my office. You should future ready it instead." And I thought it's a small difference in phrasing, but I got the point. But in fact, actually, that's how we architects are trained, and Archie's just touched on it. We design systems, not things. And what I mean by this is that a future-ready office is an organism of sorts. You know, it's designed to evolve through time, to adapt to changes along the way, and if done correctly, flexibility is, to use that word, can allow the work environment to adapt to unforeseeable changes. The secret is in establishing a robust infrastructure framework, you know, walls, floors, and ceilings, and lighting, of course, but also the IT and audiovisual framework, and also some broadly based zoning arrangements across the office about where and how people work in certain spaces. Then when you've got that framework, you can overlay on top of that a kind of a lower order system of tools and settings that are intended to have a shorter life cycle, that are intended to be able to be picked up and used and hybridized by their users, or even hacked. So sometimes we promote hackable spaces to allow users to shape it as they need those environments to be shifted. So you can think of, for example, loose furniture, collaboration setups, things like that. In an audiovisual terms, I guess you could think of, for example, desktop equipment, Wi-Fi routers, meeting room PC displays, and some of the stuff that Gerald was talking about is something which needs to be designed in order to be evolving around the changes. So actually, I'm not sure it's truly an oxymoron. I think in my view, fluidity, flexibility, and adaptability can result in being future ready, because once you build a robust framework, that's your skeleton, if you will, and it allows the opportunity to build things on top of that which are more responsive to the environment as it changes.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Gerald highlighted some of that on the tech side, and now we can see that it's also doable on the side of the ID, right? The design, the architect, the layouts. The last thing, Gerald, I'd want to touch on is scalability, right? You highlighted it briefly in your response, right? But it's perhaps the most important technology consideration right now, right? Because it's not just scaling up, it's scaling down. And then there's also the question of, can I manage it, right? Like, do I need to bring in more people on my team just if we get more meeting rooms? How is Shure addressing this need from the end users?
So I think that's a great question. So scalability, we have it up to 10 audio endpoints in a room. So for example, if you have 10 of this in a room and you decided, okay, one day I'm going to have 5 for the other room and 5 for this room, because I'm going to split it up. All you have to do is on the touch panel, you can actually just unassign them. So you don't actually have to do a lot of physical patch and unpatch kind of things. But because everything is on the network, all you have to do is to create another room and add that to another room. So that will read that as these 5 devices are in room A, these 5 devices are in room B. So the flexibility and the scalability for you to mix and match, and also to move it around, to calibrate to your different room environment, that's what as a solutions provider we are doing for you. So you don't actually have to be like, oh, I bought this ceiling microphone, I'm now stuck with this, so what am I going to do for the next 10 years, for example? That's all I can do, and this is the only space I can use. But you can actually just move this to a different room, move this to a different building as your company grows, and you just have to redo this room adapt. That's how simple it is.
And Archie, I want the same scalability question, but from the architect's perspective, right? It's easy to do it from the tech perspective. Just buy more tech, bring it in, incorporate it into your system. But from an architect's perspective, right? Square footage is not very easy to expand, right? Once walls have been built, it's not very easy to like create new rooms out of nowhere. What do you guys do to make sure that a space remains flexible, that if the user wants to change the layout or the design, they can do that?
Pretty much like it's more on the so when we study space types, there are functionality that we can explore, and we need to make sure that each of the elements that we design in the space should adapt to the function that that end user would need. So regardless, for instance, traditional office before were mostly module in rooms, right? And they're like built up to the bottom of the slab. So when the flexibility comes in, it's really hard for you to do it. So that means the infrastructure and the built-in elements into the space need to be adaptive in the sense that it shouldn't be fixed. But at the same time, the functional needs of it, like acoustics, lighting, and the flexibility of these panels need to be adapted to the functional, right, to the needs and to the changes that will happen into the space. So the strategy that we normally do is we need to understand the culture of the people that's using the space, from the law firms, from a co-working environment point of view, the tech companies. They have different attributes. They have different culture. So the solutions that we provide responds to their processes as well. So it's a really broad question. And if I would answer that in this form, it might not be enough time. But the overall approach of it is really a process driven, as what also Greg highlighted earlier, to build a skeleton to ensure that that skeleton would respond to the change that the company would want to happen in the future or even in the present time.
Great. Thank you so much, Archie. We are now going to go into the Q&A section of our discussion, and I can already see some questions streaming in. If you have any questions, please put them in chat or put them in the Q&A box. I want to start the Q&A section with something that's been in the back of my mind, and Greg, perhaps you can shed some light on this. Is the floor plan of a workplace changing? Right? Because previously we'd have a lot more hot desking, we'd have a lot more flexible spaces, right? And now with health and wellness being a much bigger concern, especially in Asia Pacific, right? Hot desking isn't preferred as much. People still want their own little space that they know that they can go to. Are boardrooms being ditched for smaller meeting rooms, huddle rooms, collaboration spaces? What are you seeing in terms of floor plans?
Absolutely, they're changing. The entire anatomy of the workplace is changing. As kind of going full circle to the beginning of this conversation, what's the purpose of an office? As Archie just alluded, is form follows function. We're building spaces to accommodate specific activities, and those activities are becoming more diverse. They are no longer about desk work. So there's the expectation that there are a set of choices along a spectrum, from solo work at one end to brainstorming and full-on collaboration, shouting, having fun, and socializing on the other end of the spectrum, and everything in between. So the environments that we're designing are being supported by new furniture innovations, new technology innovations, which create something more like a diverse landscape of activities, which you can see accommodated in these various settings. So choice, it's really about choice. And when you mention wellness, this is all part of it. Part of wellness is getting on your feet, going and doing some other stuff, having some restful time, recharging, and that's being incorporated into our designs by providing those facilities. As our employers begin to respond to the expectation of users, that set of expectations has totally shifted, that now users expect for their employers to show them care for their well-being, care for their work-life balance, and understanding the necessity to provide the resources for what they do in the office. So that's the pattern. You asked about meeting rooms. 100%. Meeting rooms are now being called meeting spaces. Meeting spaces mean they could be enclosed, they could be shielded, they could be sheltered, they could be open, they could be AV enabled, they could be totally analog, they could be combined, and so on. So that absolutely is the case. We're seeing the boardrooms. We're walking to clients today with empty boardrooms saying, I don't need this anymore. I have these meetings online. I don't ever get 20 and 30 people together. And if I do, I'll go somewhere else. And to pick up a bit on the point that Archie made a few minutes ago is that one of the things that we do now is that we scrutinize every square inch of space as being highly valuable and highly purposeful. And the price of real estate in most every Asian city is high. Our clients expect to get value out of every square inch. So we're really understanding the necessity of things and purposefulness of things, which to the previous question about adaptability and future proofing provides that, because we're providing value and we're giving flexibility for changes within that.
Yeah. Gerald, technology seems to not just be confined to the meeting room anymore, right? Those are meeting spaces. And as Greg pointed out, right, people are not just looking to put them in little rooms. They're looking to put them in collaboration areas, open areas, right? Like the shift between analog and digital is kind of trending more towards digital, right? Spaces that were previously all analog now have some digital in there, right? Be it just a screen for collaboration, or be it just like a small speakerphone or some small system from the audio side, because audio is perhaps the most important thing when it comes to collaboration, right? It's called video conferencing, but it doesn't work without audio. What are you seeing at Shure about this new demand for more tech, but for spaces that didn't have tech before?
So both STEM and Microflex actually address this. I wouldn't say it's an issue, but expanding the space and using open collaboration space has been one of the top things in 2022 that we're actually seeing. So a lot of end users have reached out to us. So I have this space. Can I use it for conferencing? So STEM actually comes up with something what we call audio fencing, where it actually creates an invisible mesh where audio does not leak through once you are out of the mesh. So that actually helps you and enables you to use this open collaboration space. And we have directional speakers as well. So using that, it doesn't really leak into the hot desk, for example. It doesn't leak as much, and you can control the levels of that. So that's from STEM. So Microflex ecosystem, we also have kind of like a fencing technology at the back of this automatic coverage area as well, where we pick up the areas that we want to pick up while avoiding the areas that we don't. So for example, if you don't want to pick up anything from the door onwards, you can actually set a zone there and you can mute it. So that becomes your mute zone. So that enhances and allows you to have and utilize your open collaboration spaces. And I believe interior designers are definitely looking into this kind of technology as well, where end users are actually demanding for this kind of request. Yeah. Thank you.
Archie, a question from the audience. They're asking, workers have changed, workplaces have changed. Are the meeting rooms also going to change? And we're talking in terms of layout, right? So one of the big things people want is meeting equity. They want inclusivity. They want everyone to be seen. They want everyone to be heard. And to me, that kind of points to, we've got to change where we put our furniture. We've got, like, tech is obviously going to help. But if it's the same old layout, right? Table, chairs all around it, it's going to be much harder. I've seen how Microsoft envisions its Microsoft Teams rooms evolving in the future, and it's almost like the table is right next to the wall so that everyone feels like they're sitting across from each other, things like that. Are these considerations that you guys are seeing coming forward from clients? Do they want a new layout for their meeting spaces?
Yes, it is mainly because of the adaptability and flexibility. Because of the square footage that is too expensive for them to add more meeting rooms. So they wanted to have multifunctional kind of configuration in that particular room. And there's even resizing, for instance, if needed, to ensure that it will promote or give more meeting room options for them. Let's say, for instance, in one day they want like 12 packs kind of meeting, but in day two, they don't actually need it. And most of the time, they need only 4 packs kind of meeting rooms. So for the client to be responsive to the end user, they need to make that room divided into two. And for you to do that, the furniture that you use, the technology that you have, like what Gerald has shared earlier, need to be intuitive for you to be more adaptive to that change. And recently, we are just actually currently we're doing a project in China where 3 meeting rooms, large meeting rooms, have been converted to a different look and feel because of the home concept, right? But at the same time, the function of it is actually promote collaboration and inviting everyone to come to the office and have that resources for them to be empowered. Empowered means they can do the right thing in that particular room without even, going to the focus area, because they can do scrums in that room, let's say in that moment, but in tomorrow they might do a formal meeting room, right? So to answer you is yes, and definitely they are changing.
Greg, same question over to you. Do you think things like inclusivity, meeting equity, they have to be addressed by a layout shift, by new furniture, or do you think we can kind of still deliver on that without going too far away from the meeting spaces and the meeting rooms that we know?
There are two elements to this in the changing user profile. One is the post-pandemic expectation of care that I mentioned, and the other is the changing demographic with regard to Gen X and with regard to Gen Z users. There is a greater emphasis, particularly amongst Gen Z users, about inclusiveness and respect of genders and so on. I was quite tickled that one of our projects was cited in a magazine, giving kind of a little award or note or mention for our understanding gender differences in the workplace, which I thought I was quite chuffed, because there's an example that sofas, okay? When you put sofas into casual areas, it's a fact that men feel more comfortable seated in a sofa chatting with others than women do, and it puts women in a position that's quite uncomfortable, can be quite uncomfortable for them in the workplace. So when we design even casual meeting spaces, you could go in, as a man, you go and think, oh, so I'm going to design the space, and you realize that you make these bumbling errors when you fail to understand the gender differences and other aspects of equity and inclusion that provide the set of behaviors in those spaces. Take the other extreme is the boardroom with a chairman at the end of it, at the end of the table. Well, we're seeing more tables that don't have a chairman position, that have got chairs, 2 chairs at the end, or chairs all around, for example. So I think the hierarchy of the workplace has been challenged by these social and demographic differences. And the equity and inclusion part of that is part of that hierarchical change that's particularly taking more account of people of different sexual orientation and people of differing genders that allow more feeling of inclusiveness in these settings. We've begun to embrace those. Another one I certainly should mention is women at work. I can rarely think of a client in the past 3 years that hasn't asked for a mother's room in their space. And it's a simple understanding that working mothers have needs that are finally being respected and understood. So there are many examples like this.
Another question from our audience. This is Marcus. I think, Gerald, sorry, you are probably the best person to address this. Are there any plans to make AV products more ID friendly? Because one of the key things that kind of crops up when we're covering case studies and we're talking about projects is the clash between AV professionals and IDs, right? There are ID elements and a projector needs to go in. There isn't enough ceiling space, but speakers and microphones need to go up there. Are you designing with the fact that IDs and AV professionals both need to kind of work together in the same space?
Yes, for sure. Without compromising the audio quality of things, we are definitely coming up with, there is a roadmap that we are definitely looking at to fit into this kind of spaces. So for example, in 2016, we launched the MXA 310, which is a table array microphone. So, and that paired up with our MXA 910 ceiling array microphone. But 5 years onward, which is today, we still have the MXA 920, but we came up with a round form factor for that. So that actually enables interior designers to be more flexible rather than just a square ceiling array microphone. With STEM ecosystem, that also gives you a round ceiling array microphone. And I think we have spoken to consultants, interior designers, and users as well. They would very much prefer the round ceiling array microphone because of the way the ceiling is designed. You can't have a square that is just protruding out there, but a circle, it looks similar to a light.
Archie, how do you handle this kind of clash between the two trades on site, especially, right? Because designing for it is one thing. When you get into the space, you might find that things move a little bit and things change a little bit. And then all of a sudden, you know, audio is impacted, video is impacted, and then ID is impacted. And that's just a bad experience overall.
Well, that's where creativity comes. And we as designers and architects would need to blend with this. I mean, these are functions, right? A room that have no integration technology won't work. So that's where when we design elements into the space, it needs to be creative enough, aesthetic balance with function of it. So recent projects that we did is we want to have a space that looks minimalist, right? And to have all these elements that are stuck on the ceiling, it tends to be eyesore, correct? So we designed certain profile of ceilings that would incorporate these elements into it. And client appreciate that. Client don't actually care more of the detail on how we integrate it, but on the look of it, right? So we just need to manage in accordance to the geometry that are available when it comes to technology. But I would also encourage integrator and solution provider to please consider aesthetics when they think about design. And I think that's why Apple has been very successful, because they engage designers upfront when they are sort of defining solutions or looking for solutions to whatever needs by the people, especially in the cultural aspect of it. When it comes to culture as well, it's really also key when we design spaces, because some of the European clients, you know, who are mature clients, they don't like all these kind of stuff in the ceiling, and that's why, I mean, I went to Japan in Tokyo once. There's even like a table that have some sounds in it integrated into the table, right? So culture is very important, and that's where solution provider need to be sensitive and compassionate with these needs. Yeah, thank you.
The last question from our audience is about hybrid work. And Greg, perhaps you could answer it. Are you seeing a variance in the demand for work from home and the work from workplace? Are you seeing variance for this composition across countries in Asia Pacific? And what are your thoughts about how someone who is working across the region can kind of address these variances and still have kind of like a game plan or a template that they could refer to?
The heads of HR that we speak with pretty uniformly tell us, and this is in the Asian cities in which we work, that a 60-40 week is coming out as being something which is mostly acceptable. The challenge that my follow-on question to these HR directors is, do you define which days they can come in, or does a manager define which days they come in? Because guess what? Everybody wants to take Monday or Friday off, and guess when the office is full? Wednesday. So the head of operations or the COO wants to say, hey, we can make a reduction on our footprint because we're only accommodating 60% of our headcount at any one moment. That's true. But then there's this influx. And so what we're having to do is to create alternative work points that kind of pick up that fluctuating sponge, if you will. It's a sponge which picks up the fluctuation in space. The variance is not huge across regions and cities, but it is very large across organizations for that reason, because the HR model is understandably still in flux. It's still being tested. It's still running through a beta testing stage itself to try to ascertain what's the best way to implement a hybrid working model that will accommodate both staff expectations and managers' expectations, as well as the company's needs.
Yeah. Perfect answer. I completely agree. I think the overall broad data might not show a lot of variance, but from client to client, from company to company, from organization to organization, there might be huge fluctuations that become extremely difficult to address with a template or like with kind of like a standard practice. with that, we have come to the end of our discussion. Panelists, thank you so much for your time. It was lovely chatting with all of you. Audience, thank you so much. It was great having you. And hopefully we will see you again very soon with another webinar talking about something else that is very important to the world of AV. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.